last session at Xola's Developer Summit at GDC 2022 is Hybrid Times, game developers sound off on working from home, compensation, and career. Kirill Tokarev is the head of 80 level and market research.
Hello. So I was told not to read because when I look down, I look sad, so we're not going to do that. So before we start, quick overview about this picture we had. So it's kind of a talk about developers and how developers should win, and it's like very positive, and yet we have a robot there, and a colleague of mine yesterday asked whether it means that robots are going to take over, and the short answer is no, but if you're into mystery, you should wait till the very end, and I'm going to tell you the whole story. So speaking about mysteries, so when Guerrilla Games were working on Horizon Zero Dawn, they had one goal. They want to create a protagonist that was kind of propelled forward by the desire to solve a mystery. And if you played the game, you kind of know it's like a detective story. You kind of figure out what's going on. You know, how did it, robotic dinosaurs are walking the planet Earth. So when we created 80 level, we wanted to answer the same kind of mystery, not about the dinosaurs and robots, but about developers. We wanted to figure out what drives developers, what do developers think about, what do they want to do, so what do they dream of? And you might say, well, developers basically dream of, they say, I had the same idea about robotic dinosaurs before, and Guerrilla Games just did it, and they owe me. But we wanted to get some more kind of like cohesive evidence of that, so we did a large survey. And today I'm going to present to you the results of that survey and kind of talk a little bit about the main things that we learned and explain how we can work with them. So a couple of words about myself. My name is Kirill Tokarev. I helped found 80 level talent recruiting company, as well as 80 level research. I was acting in an executive capacity for the last 4 years. I was leading teams in operation and development, worked with a lot of very nice world-class talent. So I think I know a thing or two about management as well as about video game developers, because I've been doing this for a while. So quickly going over the main things that we're going to discuss: where we got our data, what does this data show us, main trends, illustrations, and then kind of a little bit of a roadmap, how can managers navigate this new environment that we found ourselves in. So a little bit about our data. Basically, we did a survey of 800 people at the end of last year, beginning of this year, people from all over the place: United States, Central and Western Europe, Asia, Canada, Brazil, everywhere. The developers that we've asked questions are mostly artists, creatives, as well as game designers, developers, managers, and so on. Most of them work for video game companies, or they are freelancers, or they are founders. They work in different places, right? Majority of them work in companies which are like from 30 to 300 people. A large chunk are indie developers who work in companies that have less than 30 people there. And also a quarter about in companies will have more than 300 people. So think Ubisoft, Activision, like big studios like that. So before I kind of go into the data and start talking about the main things that we learned, I want to do a little history lesson. And what better way to do a history lesson than through images that I got from Civilization 6 Wiki. So at the beginning of the last century, most people were actually working in agriculture. Because they were working on farms, as you can see in the picture. Another large chunk of people were actually servants. So think Downton Abbey and all the cozy things that servants do there. So fast forward 50 years, and most of the people are actually working at factories. And a funny thing happened during Second World War, although Second World War was obviously not super funny. So According to the GI Bill of Rights, people were kind of incentivized to go and get a degree. And suddenly, degree and going to college became a new norm. And with that, a new class of worker emerged, the knowledge worker. And that most of us here in this audience today are knowledge workers. So we work in offices, or at least we used to work in offices until 2020, when suddenly I started working from home. And my colleagues also started working from home, and most of us started working from home. So when we asked our first question, it came as no surprise that developers actually prefer the new hybrid model. They want to stay a couple of days in the office and spend a lot of time at home. Some of them don't actually want to go to the office at all, like only 10%, and those are probably managers who want to go to the office. So working from home is not actually a new concept. So when you look at those golden master pictures all the time, you feel like, oh, it's like this huge team and everybody's cheering. But let's face it, all of those people probably have cozy desks and setups like John Romero does, and they work from home. But before that, they used to work on their personal projects and stuff, and now they're working on their actual work. So employers, they really like this trend, or rather they can't do anything about it, and 50% said, well, okay, you can enjoy hybrid work. You can work from home for a little bit. Video game companies are the same. Ubisoft was one of the companies that said, sure, in all of its studios, people can work from home, go to the office for a little bit, and so on. But the example I would like to talk here is actually Square Enix. So it's an interesting press release that they published a while ago. Basically, they said they wanted 80% of their workforce in Japan to work from home. They don't want to see them in the office. And they said there are a number of reasons for that. So first of all, they want to do like a flexible, convenient environment. Okay, we can agree to that. It's kind of flexible. Then they said they want productivity increases, so they feel like you can do more work when you're at home. Again, kind of debatable, but okay. Then they said it's optimal work-life balance. Very debatable. I don't see like very nice work-life balance there, but another 2 points I think are most important. So first of all, they want to recruit from a more diverse workforce. And the second one is that they want to easily adapt to unexpected developments. What does actually mean? If you translate it from like corporate English into normal language, it means basically they want to mitigate their risks. They want to hire as many people as possible from different regions to make sure that if something happens, and as we know, things always happen, they would be okay and they can continue developing whatever they are developing. So for publishers and developers, hiring everywhere, it's not about diversity or whatever. It's mostly about getting people to work on their stuff, and we should remember that. So when we asked about developers, what about work itself? Did you start to work more or less? Most of them said that they are working the same hours, but about 25% said that they started to actually work more. But how many hours do developers actually put in? So let's go to another history lesson. So in 1884, there was legislation passed in Austria which kind of kept up the number of hours that factory workers should do per day. And the limit was 11 hours. At that time, people actually worked 6 days a week, but let's keep that number in mind. So jumping ahead at the numbers we got from GDC that were published last year, we can actually see that during crunch periods of intense work, 24% of people actually work 12 hours a day, which is more than was legally allowed in 1884. That doesn't seem right. And we know for a fact that the more hours you put in, the less work you do. So the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they did a large research with data that spans over a decade, and they figured out that productivity is highest when people spend less hours working. So when people spend a lot of hours working, they burn out and they leave. So we got this information in 2020, in 2021. A lot of people were leaving their jobs, and they decided to try something new. So we had a question, so what do they do? And why do they leave? So again, not a big surprise there. A lot of the indie developers actually leave after their studios collapse. So COVID was harsh. A lot of studios closed doors. They couldn't do the paychecks and all that stuff. So people left and started to explore other options. There are other reasons as well. So first of all, people are motivated to get more money. I mean, such a surprise. They want better conditions, all right, they want better career opportunities, and they also want remote work. They don't want to go to the office, especially video game developers. They're like, nah, I'm not going. So McKinsey did a survey among people who recently got a new job in the last 6 months. And they asked them, would you take another job offer? Would you consider it? And that 87% said yes, if it was a remote work opportunity. So basically, if you have a candidate who's constantly moving around, or a candidate who's which is called a passive candidate in the HR circles, they are very much motivated to take another job if it's remote. They don't have to move anywhere. So what about earnings? Did they actually start to make more money? So our data shows that only about a quarter actually started to make more. The other guys probably stayed in the same compensation bracket. What about the ways how they're getting money? Salary dominates this space. So we had another question that will be available in a PDF report that I'm going to share in the end. Basically, 90% said that they like salary. But when we asked if they wanted to change something, people wanted royalties, they wanted stocks, they wanted crypto, or something else that is actually locked or connected with their performance. So they kind of want to own their success. They also want to build their own games. Surprisingly, game developers actually want to build games. Some of them have already started on building games. Some of them are just thinking about it. Only a small number don't want to do anything with them, and that's probably managers. How do they want to start building? So developers actually want to start with no money at all. They're just gonna prototype and do something themselves, and then it's just gonna blow up. Majority said that they need 100K. 100K, if anybody here knows anything about video game development, is probably not enough to start video game production. And it just shows that a lot of developers are not really well educated about how much budget do you need to do that. But let's sum up some of the stuff that we learned. So first of all, developers want to work from home. Developers still work very long hours. If it's a remote work opportunity, they can move, and this costs a lot to actual employers. And finally, they actually want to build their own games. They want to own their success. So in this kind of new environment that we find ourselves in, how can managers approach it? What can companies do about it? So the first question that we need to ask is, what are we actually investing in as companies? Think about the 1884. That was a good year. People would just, build a building by means of production, and that's, the capitalist was happy. Now, think about the golden master days. What are we actually investing in? Are we investing in the office, in the beautiful computers, in the software, IP? So the answer is kind of obvious. We are investing in the knowledge worker. And the funny thing is, as Mr. Drucker put it, that the knowledge worker needs the organization less than the organization needs the knowledge worker. And this was written in like the 80s. So how can we change that? How can we make sure that developers are more engaged, that they don't leave, and so on? I think there are kind of 2 points here. So first, we need to decentralize decision-making. You could use SAFe or something else, but the important thing that everybody in the cross-functional team should be involved. They should make decisions together, they should figure out how to solve problems, communicate more, and all of that stuff. And the second important point is that you need to link it to your basic compensation. It's okay to give salary and all, but you need to have bonuses that are linked not to like review scores and Metacritic, but to the actual sales. And there could be royalties for creation of the characters, like those dinosaurs in Horizon Zero Dawn. But in order for this to happen, some other things need to get in motion. So this is Lieutenant David Marquette. And if any one of you here did any SAFe training, you probably know this guy. So what he's famous about is that he became a captain of a submarine, a nuclear submarine. And he actually took it from like the lowest on the test scores that they did in the Army to the highest. And how did he do it? He applied the leader-leader system of leadership. Basically pushed the responsibility as low as possible so that everyone involved actually is accountable and knows that he is responsible for his little bit of work that he's doing. And remember, this guy is on a nuclear submarine. He's not building a game. If something goes wrong, I mean, there's not much place that they can go on a nuclear submarine, especially if they're underwater. The interesting thing about him is that he also improved retention. When people actually made their own decisions and thought freely, when they recruited the team back again, all of them came back. Usually it's like they come back into the port and then they just leave. They don't want to do anything with the same submarine because it's like prison on water. But all of them kind of came back and it was great. But that's kind of only one part of the puzzle. We can give you the freedom to act, but you also need to be accountable. You need to own your success as well as your failures. And if you failed, you need to do something about it. You need to develop, a plan of action, how to succeed, and all that stuff. There is a book by Jocko Willink, which is called Extreme Ownership. I'm sure some of you have seen it. And it's a very simple concept, basically saying that if something went wrong, it's your fault. Like if your boss, doesn't understand you, it's your fault because you didn't explain yourself clearly, and so on and so forth. And I took these two examples from the US Army because I think it's like a very rigid organization that has been around for a while, and it's not some organization that is easily changed. And yet they're applying all those methods. So if they can do it, we can do it too. But in order to do that, we need to create the right culture. And we talk a lot about culture here and there and what it means, but I just want to highlight one example from the research done at Columbia. And basically they had two groups of students who were studying French. One group were novices and the other were kind of more advanced. And the results were very interesting. Basically, the people who just started learning French, they didn't want any negative feedback. They were like, no, tell me what I did right. I want to start learning French. I don't want to know that I'm bad at it. Everybody knows I'm bad at it, right? I'm learning. But if you kind of excelled and you're in an advanced position, you don't want to know that you're doing great You want to know, what did you wrong? What happened? Like, where did I misstep, like mispronounce or whatever? So when we are developing a culture and when we are giving feedback in our team, in our company, we don't always have to be nice. Maybe you don't agree with me on this, but it's better for the whole process. It's also important to know how to give feedback, right? As they put it once in one book, you don't always have to slash with the sword of truth. Sometimes you just point with it. So be careful how you do it. All right. So you might ask me, what about money? It's great. We're going to give you freedom to act. We're going to give you accountability. We might even fire you if you do something wrong. But where does the money come from? So it appears that with video game companies and modern companies in general, one of the biggest things that they should focus on is actually innovation. So let's look at examples of smaller teams innovating inside bigger companies. So first innovation is Hearthstone. You might laugh about it. Of course, Hearthstone is hardly a big innovation if you think Magic the Gathering, but still, it's a small team that developed a very popular title, which makes like $400 million per year. Super successful. Splatoon. I actually didn't know this before I prepared it. So apparently they did a very small team, 10 people. One guy created this prototype for the squids jumping, 5 million in sales. Small team. Grounded. Obsidian, again, small team, a lot of registrations in a very short amount of time. The thing is that when we're speaking about innovation, it has to be decentralized. It has to be autonomous, and it has to be specific. So there should be those small teams who are thinking of their own, creating some kind of prototypes, iterating. You can't just say and go, okay, let's build a hit title, and it's going to be about a turtle, ninjas, or whatever. That just doesn't work that way. So if we're coming to a close, I just want to leave you with a couple of takeaways. That's something that you can apply in your day-to-day job. So first of all, there's no accountability without freedom. It also goes the other way around. There's no freedom without accountability. The team's view can be quite different from the leader's view. And the other way around, sometimes the leader sees more. In this case, he doesn't. So he has to trust the team to make the decision. The other aspect is developers, shockingly, want to create games. They don't want to do all of this extra work around them. So if you can outsource something or automate it, use a vendor, and we're not working at a factory anymore. So forget about 1884. And the last one, the most important one, you have to embrace the hybrid times. Video game developers most likely will continue to work from home. This is their new competitive advantage, and we have to work with it. Listen to what they want, think about what kind of compensation they want, and try to work it out. And I think if we follow these small 3 steps, we will increase retention, we'll hire people more easily, and we'll, at the end, build better games. And another point, if you're having trouble hiring people to work on a project, maybe there's something wrong with that project, because developers really want to build games from home or from the office. Thank you so much. There's a link there in the presentation where you can download the report. I want to thank Xsola for giving me some time to do this session, as well as the 80-level research team for compiling all this information together. And I'm very happy to answer any of the questions.